let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaining, feedism, and everything in their orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today we're welcoming to the show for the first time. Today we've got FatHuman.
Actually, I'm happy to be a part of the show today, or the part of the podcast today, and I'm so excited that we're talking about an important thing about gaining.
Absolutely. And, FatHuman, just to say thank you for your time today. And to all of our guests, really. We're always so appreciative of people who give up their time to talk to us on the show. So, are you ready to get into the conversation today?
Yes, sure.
Fabulous. So, we're going to be talking today about a little bit about your life as it exists in Jordan, which I think is very, very exciting. So, first question I would want to ask is, what is the day-to-day culture like in Jordan?
The culture, actually, as a people in Jordan, they're only having fun, work only. Especially after the COVID-19 comes, people, as much as they can, they would let their stress go out only.
So, as a people, it's very work-focused. It's very... Is that kind of like... Is there like a career mentality?
Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough. I think that's quite similar to London in a sense. And London is very different to the wider UK. Not to say that there aren't career people in and about, but London is certainly the place to be if you're looking to build career, And I do think that does, lend itself sometimes to gaining culture. When you work these long hours, you tend to have a lot more takeaway and you tend to be a little bit more indulgent because the work has you a bit stressed, a bit tired. So, I think that makes a lot of sense. Very relatable, I think, to a number of different people. What do you believe is the biggest misconception people have about Jordan?
The misconception is that people think that Jordan is a desert. It's only a desert and it's a dry place and it's so hot. But actually, if we would like to see the dryness and the hot places, it's only between May and September. And during the winter, it's so cold. And actually, right now, I'm feeling so cold, and I'm wearing a jacket under it, another jacket.
Yeah, I think people probably assume because there are desert portions of the country that it couldn't possibly get cold. I think that people get this idea that like, oh, the desert's not cold. I'm like, no, the desert is freezing at night. There's nothing to retain the heat.
Look, to be honest, like Jordan, you would find the desert. You would find even mountains, villages, everything all type of the nature culture. You would find it in Jordan.
I do want to visit it eventually because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Petra is in Jordan.
Yes.
And yeah, and I've always wanted to see Petra. So
look, the Petra I've just visited once, yeah, and from my own opinion, I would like to go to the Petra once again.
Is the Petra that one where it's this gorgeous front face built into the cliffs? Is that the one I'm thinking of?
Yeah, it's the temple built into the mountainside.
That's such an iconic piece of temple architecture, and it's very interesting. We talk a little bit about misconceptions. Probably something that's applicable to a lot of the Middle East is this kind of reductionist idea that all of the interesting things happen in one little location and that it's all kind of just reflections of the exact same thing. Whereas actually, there's so much space and distance between them all, and each of the different cultures probably has their own particular flavor. So, I mean, listeners, if you haven't seen images of Petra, I would encourage you to Google it because it's visibly quite
It's so great.
it's gorgeous.
And for
Look,
like, if you're a film buff, if you've seen the third Indiana Jones movie, the last act of the film takes place in Petra.
and if did you see the Aladdin movie?
No, I haven't seen that. The remake, I haven't seen it yet.
Look, to be honest, like one of my friend just saw it and he told me it was so incredible.
Yeah. But this is what we love learning really in these culture apps, what's good, what's, what like common beliefs, what's valid, what's invalid. Let's do a little unpacking and learning here. So, thinking about all that, like, what is the culture in Jordan like when it comes to obesity? Other people kind of larger in general? Do people tend to be more slender? And when it comes to fat people, what are those attitudes like?
Look, as in fat people, I'm talking about myself. Around the year, I used to be 135 kg. So from like a simple word made me lost around 25 kg.
Mm,
And there is some things that even made me lost more weight, that the type of my work, like most of the work in Jordan, like if you're fat, it's hard to find a job.
Is that because the work is very physical typically and maybe makes it a bit more challenging if you're larger? Or do you think it's because people don't like to hire fat people?
It's actually between the physical work and by like there's more challengeable jobs. Like there is a lot of people that like works harder than you, like as in fat people.
And what is the culture like when it comes to, I guess, body positivity and, these ideas of making being fat more comfortable and more acceptable? Is Jordan moving forward with a lot of that, or is it still very challenging? Because what you say about the work sounds like it might be a little challenging.
Actually, it's not a little bit, it's a lot of challenge. It's a lot of challenge. Because it's not only by work, life, everything.
So, in terms of resources for larger people, I'm thinking things like fashion and clothing, for example. Is there a lot of that in Jordan or not very much at all?
Look, you would find the places that would sell like maximum around 9x large. You would find, but those type of people that they're not a gainer, they're already fat and like they're fat since they're young, and even they won't like think to lose weight or even have any effort to lose any weight. But as a gainer or as a fetishism side, like no, I'm not to it.
There's not too much. See, again, I think this is what we like to unpack with these episodes. It's interesting to hear that, certain clothing stores can go up to 9XL. That's pretty impressive because, I mean, in America, the land of the fat, I mean, what, 2X?
In most stores, yeah, 2 or 3XL would be the highest you'd be able to find, unless you went to a specific retailer that like the big and tall or the plus size, that all the
Oh,
the
like
words that they love to throw on it and be like, oh no, this is
about the plus size, there's places like you would find it only in the capital of Jordan.
Ah, and that's Amman from memory?
Yes.
Amman, the capital of Jordan.
Yeah.
Okay. And look, I think that's quite fair. You know, in small towns, even here in the UK, I mean, they barely have the same amount of food stores versus your typical area in London. So I think that makes sense. When you're sort of further in rural or more isolated areas, that resources aren't going to be as common. Um, but still, it's really cool to know that there are certain stores that go up so large, you know, doing better than the UK, doing better than America in that sense. But it's also really interesting to hear that comparison that there are people who were born fat and they've lived their whole lives being fat and they're just doing their own thing. They're like, yeah, whatever. And then you've got the fetus side of things where it's really not that common at all. And I think it's really interesting to, again, just to see what's happening around in different places. So, I mean, asking you here personally, do you know any other gainers or fetus type people in Jordan?
Look, in Jordan or as an Middle Eastern country, no,
So even within the whole, like, just Middle East period, you don't really know any other gainers or fetuses.
no.
Wow.
Like, look, to be honest, I used to live in the UAE around 17 years,
Oh,
and I've started to gain. I've started to gain weight around like when I was around 15.
mhm.
I've started, and my weight it was around 70.
So you've grown a lot then over the years, which is very, very impressive. I mean, something I guess I can relate to living in Australia is, you know, during the summers when it gets so hot, it can be very, very challenging to continue to eat and gain and grow because you just want to drink water and hide from hide from the sun because it can be so hot and you just sweat a lot of that gained weight right off. Um, so I feel you on that front. Um, but from what you're saying, even in the UAE, there's no real gainer community. Is that right?
No,
Wow.
uh, and and even look, to be honest, as a person who lived in the UAE, maybe you would realize that not only me, most of the people who lived there, he would tell you that the GCC countries, most of them are fat.
Yes, which is really, it's a point that a lot of people bring up. You know, you see this image of, you know, the decadent Arabic man or woman, you know, and you see these robes and pieces that people wear that just billow outwards from these large bodies. And so I think there is an expectation that, you know, a gaining culture or a more indulgent foodie culture would exist. But that's really interesting, you know, the differences between intentional gaining and just
Do you think that's because of Western influence? Like, because the UAE sits towards it's in the Gulf, right? The Saudi Arabian Gulf.
Yeah,
So that's like, so it's sort of a crossroads, right? Like there's a lot of international business that comes through. There's a lot of international, like there's a lot of people moving through that part of the world that are from all other parts of the world, correct?
yeah.
Okay,
Like
so
look, to be honest, the UAE, especially Dubai, it's the most city that brings people around the world.
So, I mean, that sort of makes sense to me then that like there's probably a lot more plus size overweight people in that part because of all of these other
Mm,
influences
But
that travel
but
through.
the most plus size people are the local.
Ah,
mm,
Uh, and to be more specific about this thing and why, that there is a lot of fast food in the country, and they're using a lot of fast food.
there you go. So it definitely sounds like there's, you know, potentially influences from elsewhere that bring that sense of weight gain. But, you know, it's even like referencing America. America is such a it's known as the land of the fat people, and yet
Hmm.
gaining culture is such a small microcosm within that, you know? So again, I think it's always good for us to remember, like people often talk about Samoa and Tonga and places in the Pacific where they think, oh, surely there must be a certain culture, but it's not. It's just there's food and there's a proclivity for weight gain because of genetics, and that's kind of the end of it, you know? No shade to gainers who are probably out there doing their thing. And of course, if you are out there listening and want to come on and share your experiences, please write into us at thiccradio@gmail.com. But this is lovely to learn about Jordan, and it's very eye-opening to learn about other places like the UAE. What is your impression of gainer culture in some of these other countries like America and the UK, where there's a lot more gainers and feedies out and about? What's your opinion of all that?
Look, about the other countries as the European countries and American, those part of countries, actually they appreciate each other. Like, come on, as a feeder, I could only help the part of my country, only people of my country. Or like, if, for example, I'm German, but I live in in the US. In the US, I only help the gainers, which is in the US only.
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, Tim, I'm curious to ask you about this because I know that obviously at this stage we've talked to a couple of different people from around the world. Like, do you think living in America that maybe local gainers take for granted the access that they have to opportunities with others versus other places around the globe?
I would think that everyone who comes from what's the name of like the English speaking countries? What do they call it? The Big Five or the Big Four? What's it called?
Well, militaristically, they're referred to as the Five Eyes, like they've got
Oh,
eyes over the world, but yeah.
oh, okay. Well, it's basically coming from a country that has a lot of privilege, prosperity, opportunity, access. Yeah, I do think people take it for granted because, I mean, imagine for a minute, like, I've grown up in the Midwest my whole life. I've grown up in the United States my whole life. I really haven't had trouble getting access to food if I wanted it. And we talked, I believe it was last season, about the difference between like food deserts and food oases. And we talked about how like just because there's a ton of fast food around doesn't mean that you're in a food oasis. And then we talked about quality of food. So I think that people just in general take it for granted because they grow up in sort of a bubble, and if you don't get a lot of exposure to other cultures, other parts of the world, or you seek out that information, you do kind of grow up a little bit benignly ignorant of what other people have to go through. So yes, to answer your question, I do think they take it for granted.
I feel like it's a bit of an obvious question to ask because we like to ask, what's a change you want to see in your local gainer feedist community? And I feel like the obvious answer here is to have more of it, people that you could meet up with and have some fun, or just people that you could be friends with, right? Um, but is there anything else that comes to mind for you if you could make one change to the Jordanian gaming and feedist community? What would that be?
Look, if I would like to change, and it was so easy that the feederism side, that it would be more like people who would love to help each other as a mental everything, as an health, like around 2 weeks or 3 weeks, the first time that we've just talked, like when I told you I've just got injured. Yeah, like I didn't walk since 2 months and a half. Like I need a lot of mental care right now, uh, more than food.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, points that we've certainly referenced before on the pod that while the fun is, of course, fun, the benefit of having people around you as a community is that support. And support can look like helping you to get bigger, but support can also be friendship and
Yep.
kindness and as you were saying, mental health support, which probably becomes very easy when you just have conversations and you make friends. So this is a shout out to anyone in the Levant Arabic region of the world. If you're looking to make friends, when we do the social media calls at the end, you make sure to send our good friend here, FatHuman, a lovely little message and give them some love, okay? Um, I want to talk briefly about food, because I think we get very used to it living in the West, ideas of like the kind of meals that you make, the kind of food that you have. But as you say, people be getting fat up in the Middle East. So clearly there's got to be some good food there. So I want to ask you, thinking more specifically Jordanian, is there a specific meal or a snack or a drink, specifically Jordanian, that you think, oh, that's fabulous and everyone should be trying it?
Actually, yes. During morning breakfast, yeah, you have to get falafel and hummus and beans. This is only breakfast.
What were the beans you have with it? So it's falafel and hummus, and what kind of beans?
Java beans, we call it full.
Okie dokie. And I suppose you kind of have like the beans with the hummus, you scoop it up with your falafel, and you have all that together. That sounds really nice.
And during, for example, lunch, there is a traditional food, we call it mansaf.
Mustif.
Mansaf.
Mansef.
M-A-N, yes.
Mansef. Mansef. What is Mansef? Tell us about that.
It's like a cooked yogurt with lamb meat and rice, but there is a kind of way that they cook it that makes it great. Like a lot of my friends during the 17 years that I lived in the UAE, like they told me that actually, what do you put on the mansaf?
I mean, honestly, that sounds fabulous. I'm gonna need some of that right now. That's making me hungry just thinking about that.
And look, if you want to eat the original mansaf, come to Jordan.
And you said it was made with lamb?
Yeah.
This is something that I'm just curious about personally. When I think about like the way that certain meats are popular in different parts of the world, because like over here in the United States, it's usually beef. You know, cow is like one of the number one things that we consume. So the reason for lamb being so popular in the Middle East, is that because cows don't flourish well in that part of the world, or because there's not enough room to keep herds of cattle?
Actually, no. Like about each can look about the Arabian country. Each country refers like they're different by each other. Like the GCC countries, most of like not all of them, but most of them they prefer camels.
Oh, I've never had camel.
Like even in Jordan, like we eat camels even. Rarely that we eat camels.
What does like what would you compare camel to? Like whenever I hear someone eat something that like I'm like, well, what is it like? Is it like beef? Is it like pork? Is it like chicken?
No, actually, it has a special taste.
So probably might be a bit gamey, kind of like venison over here.
And to be honest with you, I didn't eat pork.
Um,
Interesting. It makes me think of how in Australia sometimes we eat kangaroo, but it's not as common as people think. People expect it is because kangaroos are from Australia, but it's a specialty meat. We're much more inclined to eat lamb or chicken. I'd say beef is less common than lamb, but then obviously we love to barbecue as well. And I've only barbecued kangaroo a little bit, but crocodile grills up beautifully. Um, Texture of fish tastes like chicken. Delicious. I wouldn't mind trying camel sometime. Give it a go. See
Like,
what happens. We've got camels in
look
the
if look if you want to try the original camels, go to Saudi Arabia.
Go to Saudi Arabia. Okay. See,
Yeah.
this is the thing. It's like haggis, right? Like, obviously, the idea of it, it's a bit like, oh, sheep's stomach. I don't know. But I do want to try it one day. But I'm not going to try it here in London. I'm going to go up to Edinburgh in Scotland. I'm going to Google and find out where is like the place to get the best haggis. And I'm going to try it. Because if you're going to give it to me good, I want the good, good. You know what I'm saying? So, got to be the same thing there. So, Tim, when we do our international trip, Saudi Arabia, we're getting camel. But Jordan, we're gonna get some masef because that sounds delicious. What about drinks? Is there like a fruit drink or a wine or just any other kind of libation that's very, very popular in Jordan?
Look, there's something. Actually, it's not only in Jordan, even in Syria, Lebanon, and Palestine. Yeah. Uh, we call it Tamar Hindi.
Tamahindi.
Yeah, which is the dates.
Oh, dates. Okay. Actually, that sounds that could be quite fragrant and quite sweet and syrupy. Is that right?
Actually, it's between sweet and sour.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
it, it, it depends that how actually people do it.
Hmm. No, that's good to know. We'll have to get ourselves some Tamahindi, Tim, when we inevitably do our world class trip. Um, Thinking a little bit about when you were growing up, with TV and maybe books and comics and radio and all the other bits and pieces, were there any like fat Jordanian people that inspired you, like celebrities, comedians, or cartoon characters on TV? Was there anyone like that for you in Jordan?
Uh, nope.
No. Fair enough. What about in the UAE? We're talking a little bit about that today as well, I suppose. Was there much of that in the UAE?
Actually, to be honest, as an characterist, as an Arabian countries, there is no any certain person, but like there there's a person who actually his name Najil Qaq. Actually he's Jordanian, but he's not a gainer.
Okay, but is he a very large person?
Yeah,
Okay. So did you find, like, looking at him that was quite inspirational to go, ooh, I want to look like that one day?
no,
Oh, well, fair enough. We all take our inspirations from different places. What for you has been the biggest inspiration to gain weight? Are there any people you've seen that made you think, ooh, I want to look like that?
actually it's not about people or person. It's about myself, and especially that I'm a person who love food.
I mean, I love that. I think that's very valid. I feel like that maybe lends itself to the most successfully comfortable gains, right? Because when you're inspired by other people,
Yeah,
you think that's wonderful, and then you gain weight, but all bodies are different. So it's very likely you might be inspired by someone to gain, but then your body looks very different to theirs. Whereas if you just love to eat and you love good food, well, baby, all of that luscious fat is just a wonderful add-on to the situation. So I think that's really cool.
yeah.
When it comes to, complimenting people for their size, is there like a phrase in Arabic that you would say to be like, "Oh, you look thick and beautiful and wonderful"? Like, is there a particular phrase or no?
Look, we actually use it for ladies, the stuff. Like we say, ايش يا بطة،
Eshav
ايش يا مزة، ايش يا مزة،
eshavuza.
مزة.
Muza eshavuza. Muza, sorry, eshamuza.
Yes.
Eshamuza. And what does eshamuza mean?
Actually, it's between something beautiful.
Something beautiful. All right. Well, Eshamuza. And Eshamuza to all y'all. That's fabulous. I love these little phrases. That's real cute. Here's a question for you, because I know that we're coming a little bit now to the end of our chat today. Is there anything about your experience with gaming and feedism and life in Jordan that we haven't talked about yet that you'd like to talk about?
Like, if you want to be a gainer, you have to work by yourself. Like, do not work with people. Like, open a place by yourself, e-commerce, anything, like to support yourself.
No, that's totally understandable. And, I really hope as we begin to explore some of these different regions in the world, if anyone listening is in and around the Middle East, the Levant, this, West Asia, North African part of the world, the people who we have on and who've given us grace to be on the show and talk to us, please reach out and make friends and, meet up and have a good time, and let's see the development, of more and more communities. So coming to the end here, FatHuman, I just want to say thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it.
And I appreciate that, like, to know good people as you.
Oh, bless you.
Thank you.
It's really kind of you to say. Now, where can our listeners find you online? What are your social media handles?
Instagram, FatHuman, and Feabie. And like, if you have a Facebook, Hamza Bakir.
There we go. Well, that's it for another wonderful week here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. Now, if you liked this episode, the podcast, or us in general, please share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BlueSky at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at ThickyMouse. You can also look us up on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Thicc Radio, or at our website at podpage.com/Thicc Radio. If you want to submit a voice note or become a financial supporter of the show, you can find the links in the show notes, and you can also write to us at thiccradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Anchor app podcast produced by stannnum and Thiccy Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by Spotify.